Nobody really noticed Lee when he walked into a room. At 42 years old, with his plain uniform and quiet voice, he blended into the background like wallpaper. For 15 years, he had driven the same delivery truck for express parcels, following the same roads, carrying boxes and envelopes to homes and businesses across the city. Every morning at 5:30, Lee arrived at the warehouse before anyone else. He liked the quiet moments before chaos took over, just him and the packages waiting to be sorted. He would carefully organize his deliveries not by the company's standard route, but by neighborhoods he had come to know like the back of his hand. He knew which streets flooded when it rained, which blocks had dogs that barked at trucks, and which apartment buildings had broken elevators on Tuesdays. "Hey, Map Man, still playing with your packages?" The loud voice of Ricky, a younger driver, broke the morning silence. Ricky and his friends found Lee's methods amusing. "The computer gives us routes for a reason, old-timer." Lee just nodded and continued sorting. He had learned long ago that explaining himself only invited more jokes. What these youngsters didn't understand was that Lee's system saved him nearly 2 hours every day, time the computer's impersonal algorithms couldn't account for. In the break room, drivers gathered around the coffee machine, sharing weekend stories and complaining about difficult customers. Lee sat at the corner table, quietly making notes in his worn leather notebook. 15 years of observations filled dozens of these notebooks: traffic patterns, customer preferences, package handling tips. Some days he wrote about Mrs. Wu on Oak Street, who needed packages placed behind the flower pot because she couldn't bend down. Other days he noted how the new construction on Pine Road added 17 minutes to that route. "What are you always writing in there anyway?" asked Diane, the dispatch manager, as she refilled her coffee cup. "Secret love letters." The room erupted in laughter. "Just notes," Lee replied softly. "About the routes." 15 years of notes. Company should give you a gold star. Someone called out. More laughter followed. What they didn't know was that Lee used to work as a data analyst before the tech crash cost him his job. Delivering packages wasn't his dream, but it paid the bills while he cared for his elderly mother. The analytical mind that once tracked market trends now tracked delivery patterns instead. That afternoon, as dark clouds gathered overhead, Lee knocked on the door of a small house at the end of a cul-de-sac. An elderly man with thick glasses opened it. "Right on time as always," the man said with a smile. "Everyone else comes after 5, but I can set my watch by you." Lee handed over the package. "Weather's turning bad. Thought I'd get to you before the rain." "Much appreciated. Stay dry out there." These small moments made the job worthwhile. Lee knew the names and faces of over 300 regular customers on his route. Not just their names, he knew which ones worked night shifts and slept during the day, which ones had new babies and needed quiet deliveries, which ones were expecting important medications. Back at the warehouse, end-of-day reports showed Lee had delivered 127 packages minus 22 more than the company average, with 0 complaints. No one mentioned this. Instead, the supervisor frowned at his timesheet. "You're logging out late again. Computer says your route should take 8 hours, not 8 hours and 17 minutes. "The West Side construction," Lee began. "Just follow the system, Lee. That's all I'm asking. Follow the system like everyone else." On his drive home, rain tapping against the windshield of his old sedan, Lee thought about the system. A system designed by people who had never delivered a single package. A system that didn't account for real-world variables like construction, weather, or human needs. In his apartment that night, Lee added new notes to his collection. Then he pulled out a large map of the city and started marking it with colored pens. Red for high-traffic areas during morning hours. Blue for neighborhoods with the most elderly residents. Green for business districts that opened late. Little did he know that this map, these notebooks, and his overlooked wisdom would soon change everything, not just for him, but for the entire delivery industry. People might laugh now, but Lee would have the last laugh. And it would be sweeter than anyone could imagine. The news hit like a thunderbolt on a clear day. Lee was sorting his packages in his usual corner of the warehouse when he noticed groups of workers huddled together, voices low and faces worried. Something was wrong. "Hey, what's going on?" he asked Tina, who worked at the front desk. "You haven't heard?" Her eyes were wide. "Global Shipping just bought us out. The big boss called an emergency meeting at 10. Everyone's saying there will be cuts. Lee's stomach tightened. At his age, with his modest education, finding another job wouldn't be easy. He thought of his mother's medical bills and the rent that kept climbing every year. By 10 o'clock, the tension in the warehouse meeting room was thick enough to cut with a knife. Nearly 80 employees packed in, standing against walls, whispering worries to each other. Lee found a spot in the back corner, his one notebook clutched in his hand out of habit. The company CEO, a tall woman with tired eyes, didn't waste time with small talk. As most of you have heard, Express Parcels has been acquired by Global Shipping. I won't sugarcoat this, there will be changes. A groan rippled through the crowd. Global Shipping has a different delivery model, more tech-focused. They've given us 6 months to prove our value, or... She didn't need to finish. Everyone understood the threat of closure. What about our jobs? Someone called out. That depends on how well we adapt. Global wants innovation, efficiency improvements of at least 20%. They're looking for ideas that set us apart from their other acquisitions. As the meeting broke up, panic spread like wildfire. In the break room, people updated resumes on their phones. By the lockers, 2 drivers argued about which competitor might be hiring. Near the dispatch desk, a group complained about corporate greed. But something different was happening inside Lee's mind. Where others saw disaster, he saw something else, a chance. For 15 years, he'd been the weird guy with notebooks full of ideas nobody wanted to hear. Now the company needed those ideas. That night, Lee didn't sleep. His small apartment looked like a war room. Papers covered every surface. 15 years of notebooks stood in stacks on his kitchen table. Charts taped to walls tracked delivery times, traffic patterns, and customer preferences. He had mapped the city into what he called micro-neighborhoods, areas with similar delivery characteristics regardless of zip code. This could work, he whispered to himself as dawn broke. This could actually work. Lee called in sick the next day, the first sick day he'd taken in 7 years. He needed uninterrupted time. Using his old data analysis skills, he created spreadsheets showing how his neighborhood-based approach could cut fuel costs dramatically. He calculated time savings based on his own route experience, then multiplied across the company's fleet. The numbers were better than he'd expected. By the 3rd day, Lee had built a complete presentation. He practiced in front of his bathroom mirror, trying to sound confident. Public speaking had never been his strength. His mother watched him from her wheelchair, offering encouragement. "You know what you're talking about," she told him. "Just talk like you're explaining it to me." When Lee returned to work, his supervisor Greg frowned at him. "Nice of you to join us again. Where have you been?" "I've been working on something," Lee said. "Something for the company. I need to talk to the new management team." Greg laughed. "You? Talk to management? About what? How to deliver packages slower than the computer says you should." "It's a new delivery system," Lee persisted. "Based on real data I've collected over 15 years. It could save the company millions." "Look," Greg sighed, "I know everyone's worried about their jobs, but the suits don't want to hear from drivers. They want tech solutions, apps, drones, not notebook scribblings from some delivery guy." The other drivers nearby were listening now, some smirking, others looking embarrassed for Lee. "Just pass my request up the chain," Lee said quietly. "Please." "Fine," Greg rolled his eyes. "Don't say I didn't warn you when they laugh you out of the building." As Lee walked away, he heard snickers behind him. "Old man thinks he's gonna save the company," someone whispered loudly. But Lee wasn't bothered. For the first time in years, he felt a flutter of excitement in his chest. The notebooks, the data, the system he'd created and refined for 15 years. It wasn't just about saving his job anymore. It was about finally being heard. 3 days passed with no word about Lee's request to meet with management. He continued his routes, quietly efficient as always, but his mind raced with thoughts of his presentation. Had Greg even passed his request up the chain? Or had it been tossed aside like so many of his suggestions over the years? On the 4th morning, Lee was loading his truck when his supervisor approached, looking uncomfortable. "Well, you got your wish," Greg said, holding out a piece of paper. "Someone up there must be desperate. The new efficiency director wants to see you tomorrow at 9 a.m. Lee took the paper with slightly trembling hands. It was real. A meeting request from the corporate office downtown. 15 minutes, Greg added with a smirk. That's all you get. Don't embarrass yourself, and don't embarrass me for sending you. Word spread quickly through the warehouse. Lee could feel eyes following him, hear whispers as he passed. Hey everyone, called out Ricky from across the loading bay. Better get your packages today. Our boy Lee's gonna be too busy being a big shot executive tomorrow. Laughter rippled through the room. Lee kept his head down and continued working. That night, Lee ironed his one good shirt. A light blue button-down he bought years ago for a cousin's wedding. He polished his old leather shoes until they gleamed. His mother watched from her chair in their small living room. You've always seen things others miss, she said quietly. That's a gift. Or a curse, Lee replied, nervously adjusting his tie for the 5th time. Only if you keep it to yourself, she said. Tomorrow, you're not keeping it to yourself anymore. Morning came too quickly. Lee had barely slept. He packed his presentation materials neatly in an old briefcase that had belonged to his father. The downtown office of Express Parcels was a 20-story glass building that Lee had delivered to countless times but never entered. Today, he walked through the front doors, past the security desk, and into an elevator filled with people in suits who didn't give him a second glance. The efficiency director's assistant, a young man with frameless glasses, looked surprised when Lee introduced himself. Oh, you're the driver with the idea. His tone made it clear what he thought of ideas from delivery drivers. Mr. Patel is very busy today. He can only give you 10 minutes now. 10 minutes, not 15. They were already cutting his time. That's fine, Lee said, gripping his briefcase tighter. 10 minutes is enough. The assistant led him into a corner office with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city. 3 people sat around a glass table. Mr. Patel, the new efficiency director, a woman Lee didn't recognize, and to his surprise, the company CEO from the warehouse meeting. This is the delivery driver, the assistant announced, as if Lee were a package being dropped off. Mr. Patel, a sharp-featured man with salt and pepper hair, checked his watch immediately. We're on a tight schedule today. You have an idea to improve efficiency? Lee took a deep breath. Yes, I've developed a neighborhood-centric delivery system that could save the company millions. The woman exchanged a glance with Mr. Patel. Lee could read their expressions clearly. This is going to be a waste of time. With shaking hands, Lee opened his briefcase and pulled out his materials. He'd practiced all night, but now the words stuck in his throat. The 3 executives stared at him, waiting. Then Lee remembered his mother's advice. Just talk like you're explaining it to me. For 15 years, he began. I've been watching how this company loses money every day. This got their attention. Lee laid out his hand-drawn maps on the table. The computer sorts packages by zip code and distance, but that ignores real-world conditions. He pointed to a colored section. This neighborhood has school traffic between 7:30 and 8:30 a.m., adding 23 minutes to any delivery. But after 9, it's the fastest route in the district. He turned to another map. These 3 streets look close on GPS, but they're separated by a hill no truck can climb in winter. Every year, we waste hours on repeated attempts. Lee's voice grew stronger as he continued, pointing out patterns the computer algorithms missed: construction zones, traffic bottlenecks, weather impacts. By organizing deliveries around real neighborhood patterns instead of just distance, my route delivers 27% more packages than the company average, with half the fuel cost. The woman leaned forward, suddenly interested. You've tested this? Every day for 15 years, Lee replied. On my own route. Mr. Patel checked his watch again, but this time not out of impatience. Lee's 10 minutes had stretched to 20, and no one had stopped him. The system doesn't just account for geography, Lee continued, gaining confidence. It accounts for people. Knowing which customers are home when, which businesses accept deliveries at what hours. This data is gold, and we throw it away every day. The CEO, who had been silent until now, looked directly at Lee. How quickly could this be implemented? Lee met her gaze. I could start tomorrow. The room fell silent after Lee's presentation. He stood there, heart pounding, waiting for someone to speak. Mr. Patel tapped his pen against the glass table, his expression unreadable. The CEO glanced at the woman beside her, who was still studying Lee's hand-drawn maps. "You've been collecting this data for 15 years?" the woman finally asked. "On your own time?" Lee nodded. "I used to work in data analysis before the tech crash. Old habits, I guess." The CEO leaned forward. "And you're certain about these numbers?" "A 23% fuel reduction and 17% increase in deliveries per hour seems too good to be true," Lee finished for her. "I know. But I've been running my route this way for years. Check my delivery stats against any driver in the company." Mr. Patel pulled out his tablet and tapped the screen several times. His eyebrows raised slightly. "He's right," he said to the others. "His efficiency ratings are consistently top tier, despite the fact that he doesn't follow the computer-generated routes." "I follow better routes," Lee said simply. The woman, who Lee now realized must be from Global Shipping, stood up and walked to the window. She stared out at the city below for a long moment. "What would you need to implement this system?" she asked without turning around. Lee hadn't expected this question. He'd been prepared for rejection, maybe a patronizing pat on the back. Not this. "Well," he began cautiously, "I'd need access to the routing software and data from all our trucks, fuel consumption, delivery times, traffic delays. I need to train a few drivers in each district on the new approach." "People costs," Mr. Patel noted. "Training isn't cheap." "Neither is wasting fuel on poorly planned routes," the CEO countered. She turned to Lee. "If we gave you 3 months to prove this works in one distribution center, could you do it?" 3 months. 1 distribution center. It was more than Lee had dared hope for. "Yes," he said firmly. "I could do it in 2. A faint smile crossed the CEO's face. "Let's stick with 3. Ambition is good, but we need solid results." Back at the warehouse that afternoon, Lee walked through the doors in a daze. Everything looked the same: the packages, the trucks, the bustling workers, but everything had changed. He had changed. Greg intercepted him near the time clock. "So, how'd it go? They'd laugh you out of the building?" Before Lee could answer, his phone rang. It was Mr. Patel's assistant, asking him to report to HR tomorrow morning to discuss his temporary reassignment. Lee pocketed his phone and looked at Greg. "They want to try my system." Greg's jaw dropped. "You're kidding me." The news spread through the warehouse like wildfire. By break time, everyone knew that quiet old Lee had somehow convinced the corporate office to test his delivery system. Reactions were mixed. Some clapped him on the back with genuine congratulations. Others watched from a distance, suspicion in their eyes. Ricky cornered him in the break room. "So do you think you're better than us now? Got it all figured out?" "It's not about being better," Lee said. "It's about doing better. All of us." "Yeah, right. You just threw the rest of us under the bus to save your own job." Lee shook his head. "My system will create more jobs, not fewer. More efficient routes mean we can handle more packages with the same number of trucks. More packages mean more business. More business means more drivers." Ricky didn't look convinced, but a few others nearby were listening carefully. That night, Lee could barely sleep. His mind raced with plans, improvements, training strategies. For the first time in 15 years, someone was actually going to listen to his ideas. Really listen. His mother noticed his excitement at breakfast. "You look different today," she said, smiling. "Younger somehow." "I feel different," Lee admitted. "Scared, but good scared, you know." She reached across the table and squeezed his hand. "Your father would be proud. He always said you had a special way of seeing things." As Lee headed out the door to his new temporary office, a real office with a desk and computer, he patted the worn leather notebook in his pocket. 15 years of being overlooked, of being the weird guy with the notebooks, of hearing that's just how things are done. Now he had 3 months to prove them all wrong. 3 months to show that sometimes the quietest voice in the room has the most important things to say. And he wasn't going to waste a single day. Lee's first day in his new role started with a shock. He was given a small office on the 2nd floor of the warehouse. Nothing fancy, just a desk, computer, and whiteboard, but it was more than he'd ever had at the company. The bigger surprise came when Mr. Patel introduced him to his team, 5 drivers, including Ricky, and 2 dispatchers. "These people will help you implement your system," Mr. Patel explained. "They've been temporarily reassigned to your project." The look on Ricky's face was priceless, a mix of disbelief and annoyance. The others seemed uncertain, shifting from foot to foot, avoiding eye contact. "I'll check in weekly," Mr. Patel said, heading for the door. "Remember, you have 3 months to show results." And just like that, Lee was in charge of people who, until yesterday, had seen him as nothing more than the weird guy with notebooks. So, he began awkwardly, "I guess we should get started." The first week was rough, really rough. Lee had spent 15 years thinking about delivery routes, but he'd never led a team before. His quiet voice sometimes got lost in arguments. When he tried to explain his neighborhood mapping system, eyes glazed over. Ricky openly challenged him at every turn. "This makes no sense," Ricky complained, pointing at Lee's hand-drawn maps. "You want me to go to Oak Street before Pine Avenue? That's backtracking." "It seems that way on a flat map," Lee tried to explain. "But Oak Street has school traffic until 9 a.m. If you hit Pine first, you'll waste 40 minutes sitting in that traffic. The computer says." "The computer doesn't sit in traffic," Lee interrupted, surprising himself with his firmness. "We do." Slowly, painfully, they started to make progress. Lee assigned each team member to a neighborhood cluster based on their experience and driving style. He paired the dispatch team with drivers to update delivery windows based on real-world conditions, not just distance calculations. By the end of the second week, they had remapped 30% of their routes. Some drivers outside the test team started to take notice. "Hey, how come Taylor's team is getting back an hour earlier than everyone else?" one asked in the break room. Taylor, one of Lee's team members, just smiled. "Better routing." The third week brought their first crisis. A major storm hit the city, causing flooding in several neighborhoods. The company's computer system couldn't adjust fast enough, sending drivers into impassable areas. Lee gathered his team early that morning. "Forget today's computer routes," he told them. "We're going to use our neighborhood system to work around the flooding." "That's against protocol," one of the dispatchers warned. "So is drowning our trucks," Lee replied. "Trust me." His team rerouted packages, created new delivery clusters based on flood reports, and hit the road while other teams waited for updated computer guidance. By day's end, Lee's team had delivered 84% of their packages despite the weather. The rest of the warehouse managed only 46%. Mr. Patel noticed. The next morning, he called Lee. "Your weather response yesterday was impressive," he said. "How did you adjust so quickly?" "The neighborhood system," Lee explained. "It's more flexible than the computer routes. We know which streets flood first, which hills get slippery, which areas lose power." "Expand it," Mr. Patel ordered. "I want all drivers in the test center using your system by next week." The expansion wasn't easy. More drivers meant more resistance. Some veterans refused to change routes they'd driven for years. Others complained about the extra training, but a few early converts helped turn the tide. Surprisingly, Ricky became one of Lee's strongest supporters. After seeing his delivery times improve by 40 minutes each day, he started convincing other skeptics. "Look, I thought it was nonsense too," Lee overheard him telling a group of drivers. "But I'm home for dinner with my kids now instead of still being on the road. Just try it for a week." By the end of the second month, the entire test center was using Lee's neighborhood system. Fuel costs had dropped by 18%, and delivery completion rates were up 12%. Drivers reported less stress and fewer traffic delays. Customer complaints about late or missed deliveries decreased dramatically. Lee stayed late most nights, fine-tuning routes, training new drivers, adding details to his system. His mother worried about him working so hard, but Lee hadn't felt this alive in years. For the first time, his mind, his way of seeing patterns others missed, was valued. One evening, as Lee was updating his maps, he heard a knock on his office door. It was the CEO, making a surprise visit to the warehouse. "I hear good things about your project," she said, studying the wall of maps Lee had created. "Very good things indeed." The 3-month trial period was coming to an end, and tension filled the air at the warehouse. Everyone knew that representatives from Global Shipping would arrive soon to evaluate Lee's system. Jobs were on the line, not just Lee's, but possibly the entire branch. Lee hardly slept the night before the big presentation. He prepared charts showing the improvements: fuel costs down 23%, delivery times improved by 17%, customer complaints reduced by 40%. The numbers spoke for themselves, but would it be enough? He arrived early to find the warehouse unusually quiet. Drivers stood in small groups, talking in hushed voices. They fell silent when they saw Lee. "Big day," Greg said, approaching him. The supervisor who once dismissed Lee's ideas now looked almost nervous. "You ready for this?" Lee nodded, clutching his presentation folder. "As ready as I'll ever be." The meeting room was packed. Drivers who could spare a few minutes from their routes squeezed in alongside dispatchers and warehouse staff. At the front table sat the CEO, Mr. Patel, and three stern-looking executives from Global Shipping. The CEO stood to introduce Lee. "3 months ago, we gave this man a challenge. Prove that his neighborhood-based delivery system could outperform our standard computer routing. Today, he'll show us the results." As Lee walked to the front, he caught sight of his team members. Ricky gave him a supple thumbs up. Taylor nodded encouragingly. Even the dispatchers who had initially resisted his system were now rooting for him. "Thank you for coming," Lee began. His voice was stronger than it had been 3 months ago. Leading a team had changed him in ways he hadn't expected. "I'd like to show you what we've accomplished." For the next 30 minutes, Lee walked them through the data. He showed before and after maps of delivery routes, fuel consumption charts, driver satisfaction surveys, and customer feedback scores. The numbers were even better than projected. Most importantly, Lee said, pointing to his final slide, these improvements didn't require expensive technology. They required something we already had, the knowledge and experience of our drivers combined with proper data analysis. When he finished, the room was silent. The Global Shipping executives whispered among themselves. One of them, a gray-haired woman with sharp eyes, looked directly at Lee. "Mr. Patel tells me you were a data analyst before becoming a delivery driver," she said. "Why the career change?" The question caught Lee off guard. He hadn't expected to discuss his personal history. "The tech crash," he answered honestly. "I lost my job, had bills to pay, and my mother to support. Delivering packages was supposed to be temporary." 15 years is a long temporary job, she observed. Lee smiled slightly. "I guess I got comfortable, and I kept thinking I could make things better, even if nobody was listening." The CEO stepped forward. "I think we've heard enough to make a decision." She looked at the Global Shipping executives, who nodded in agreement. Lee's system will be implemented company-wide, effective immediately. A cheer erupted from the warehouse staff. Hands clapped Lee on the back. Someone whistled loudly. But the CEO wasn't finished. "Additionally, we're creating a new position, Director of Delivery Innovation. Lee, we'd like to offer you the job, with a salary appropriate to an executive role." The room went quiet again. Lee stood frozen, trying to process what he'd just heard. "Director? Executive salary?" "The position comes with a team," Mr. Patel added. "You'll need to select people who understand your system and can help implement it across all our branches." As the meeting broke up, drivers and staff surrounded Lee, offering congratulations and, in some cases, barely disguised job requests. The same people who had laughed at his notebooks were now eager to be part of his team. Later that afternoon, Lee found himself alone in his office, still trying to absorb the day's events. There was a knock at the door. It was Ricky. "So, boss," Ricky said with a grin, "got room on your team for someone who gave you a hard time?" Lee smiled. "Actually, I need people who question things. That's how systems get better." Ricky looked relieved. "You know, when they first put me on your team, I thought it was punishment. Turns out it was the luckiest break of my career." After Ricky left, Lee called his mother to share the news. As he described his new position and salary, her voice filled with tears of joy. "I always knew you were meant for more than just delivering packages," she said. "But that's the thing," Lee replied, looking at the worn leather notebook on his desk, the first of many that had led to this moment. "I couldn't have done this without being a delivery man first. Sometimes you have to be overlooked before you can truly see what others miss." 5 years passed in what felt like the blink of an eye. On a bright spring morning, Lee stood at the window of his corner office, watching the fleet of delivery trucks heading out for the day. Each truck now bore the new company logo, Neighborhood Express, the name that had replaced Express Parcels 2 years ago after Lee's system had completely transformed the business. The journey hadn't been easy. Expanding his neighborhood system across all branches meant countless late nights, heated arguments with resistant managers, and more presentations than Lee could count. But the results spoke for themselves. The company had doubled in size, overtaking competitors who were still relying on outdated computer routing. Customer satisfaction had reached all-time highs. "Your 9 o'clock is here," said his assistant, poking her head through the door. Lee turned from the window and straightened his tie, still not entirely comfortable in business attire after years in a delivery uniform. "Send them in." A group of business students filed into his office, notebooks in hand. The local university regularly sent students to learn about what professors now called the neighborhood method, a case study in how ground-level observation could outperform sophisticated algorithms. "Thank you for meeting with us, sir," said one student, clearly nervous. "Please, call me Lee," he replied with a smile. "I was a delivery driver a lot longer than I've been an executive." For the next hour, Lee explained his system to the EVA students. He showed them the original notebooks, now carefully preserved, but still referenced when fine-tuning routes. He described how knowing that Mrs. Wu needed packages behind her flower pot was just as important as knowing the fastest way to her street. The big lesson, Lee told them, isn't about delivery routes. It's about listening to the people who do the actual work. They see things that computers and executives miss. As the students left, Lee checked his calendar. He had one more appointment today, the one he'd been looking forward to all week. Downstairs in the training center, 20 new drivers sat in rows, looking much as Lee had on his first day 15 years ago. As Director of Innovation, he didn't need to personally welcome new employees, but he insisted on meeting every new driver class. "The person coming to speak to you now," the trainer was saying as Lee entered, "started just where you are. His ideas changed not just our company, but the entire delivery industry." Lee felt himself blush as the room applauded. No matter how many times it happened, recognition still felt strange. "I'm not here to give you a big speech," he told the new drivers. "Just to tell you that every one of you has the potential to see things others miss. Keep your eyes open. Take notes. Speak up, even when people laugh." Afterward, as Lee walked through the warehouse, he passed the Wall of Innovation, a display showing employee ideas that had improved the company. It had been his first initiative as director, a place where any worker, from janitor to vice president, could submit suggestions without fear of mockery. His phone buzzed with a message. Tonight was the annual Logistics Industry Awards, and his mother was reminding him not to be late. She was coming as his guest, just as she had each year since he'd won his first award for innovation. On his way out, Lee spotted a familiar face by the loading docks, Greg, his old supervisor. He'd been offered positions on Lee's team multiple times but always declined, saying he preferred supervising drivers to sitting in meetings. "Big night tonight," Greg said with a grin. "Heard you're up for Executive of the Year." Lee shrugged. "Just another fancy dinner." "You deserve it," Greg said, suddenly serious. "I should have listened to you years ago. We all should have." "Water under the bridge," Lee replied, meaning it. Success had never been about proving others wrong. That evening, as Lee sat at the awards banquet with his mother beside him, he watched industry leaders networking around him. CEOs and logistics experts who once would have ignored a delivery driver now lined up to shake his hand. When they called his name as Executive of the Year, the room erupted in applause. Lee walked to the stage, the journey from his delivery truck to this podium still feeling somewhat unreal. "Success isn't about titles or recognition," he told the audience, holding his award. "It's about seeing what needs to be fixed and having the courage to speak up, even when no one wants to listen." As he returned to his seat, he caught sight of a man at a distant table, the former head of a competing delivery company that had gone bankrupt after failing to innovate. The man who once told Lee at an industry meeting that delivery guys should stick to driving, not thinking. Their eyes met briefly across the room. Lee gave him a small, genuine smile, not of triumph, but of understanding. He had nothing to prove anymore. The quiet delivery man with notebooks full of ideas had found his voice, and the world had finally listened. Sometimes, the last laugh isn't about laughing at all. It's about standing in your truth and letting the results speak for themselves.